If there is one crime I'm guilty of, it's the fact that in the years I've been covering videos on Noir Reservoir, there's been a certain series I've as of yet not covered. And it's strange to me that I've not yet covered it. After all, it is a series that pretty much covered the entirety of my childhood, spending countless hours huddled in front of my CRTV instead of investing in sports and making my dad proud. Of course, I'm talking about the Final Fantasy series, which for me pretty much became my entire personality, labelling myself as some sort of Final Fantasy freak and talking about it constantly. You can imagine I was a bullied child growing up, like a lot. But boy, if those kids could see that Final Fantasy loving loser now, they'd see that young boy has now grown into a man, who is still a Final Fantasy loving loser, but now he's bigger, so he could probably beat them in a fight. Maybe. But my ability to beat up primary school children isn't the subject of this video. That'll be a future one. Instead, it's time to stop putting it off and start talking about one of the greatest role-playing game series of all time. Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy is popular. In fact, Final Fantasy is second only to Pokemon in terms of best-selling role-playing game franchise of all time, having released numerous games since its conception in 1987. At present, there are 15 main titles in the Final Fantasy series which are identified as numbered games, alongside numerous spin-offs and sequels, which kind of makes the whole final name redundant. Now, of course, I could look to go through each of the games one by one, starting with the initial game, but there's nothing strictly sequential across the series to stop me from diving right into the middle. And that's honestly how I would sum up Final Fantasy. I first started the series with 8, and I've picked up the titles at random, because that's what's great about the series. You can straight up just do that. Each game is in their own contained universe, and it's not like the player needs to watch several TV shows, a specific movie, or read some obscure book to understand the lore of what's happening. So after too many years of being incredibly lazy, I'm finally starting the Noir Reservoir Tales of Final Fantasy, and I'm doing it right, with Final Fantasy IV. Final Fantasy IV was released in 1991 for both Japan and North America, although once again, Square decided that those dumb Europeans wouldn't be getting their fancy numbers, and instead, it never released there until the PlayStation 1 version in 2002. And even then, that was a whopping 5 years after the version released in Japan for the first time. Thanks Square, glad you really value us overseas. Although to be fair, America wasn't all too far in the clear, since this was only the second title in the franchise to be released there, following after the original Final Fantasy, and was instead dubbed Final Fantasy II to avoid confusion for American audiences, which it inevitably did anyway, to the complete and utter annoyance and confusion of collectors. Since its initial release, Final Fantasy IV has been remastered and ported many times, finally being named globally as the fourth title in the series, with these later installments including a Nintendo DS remaster in 2007 and the most recent Pixel remaster, which remade Final Fantasies 1 through 6 in 2021. Just so we're crystal clear, the version that I'm currently playing is the Pixel remaster version on Steam. Because take that, you console peasants, you don't get to enjoy your early Final Fantasies. Why? Because fuck you, that's why. It's also one of the few Final Fantasy games to have a series in itself, with two sequels, Final Fantasy IV Interlude and Final Fantasy IV The After Years. Normally I try to cover as much of these games as possible in one singular video, but since I have an incredibly bad attention span, I figured I'd save you the hassle and cover those perhaps in a later video. So see you in 2025. The original Final Fantasy featured cookie-cutter templates of playable characters in the form of the Warriors of Light, and let them choose their class, whereas 2 didn't really have its own class system, and 3 had a job system that let the player change the party class at will. But 4 was a lot different in that it featured a larger cast of characters, each locked into their own class and jumping into the party at times where the plot warranted it, proving a much more prominent story. The game opens with Cecil Harvey, a Dark Knight in service to the Kingdom of Baron, having just launched an assault on the city of Mysidia, having stolen the Water Crystal, although at the cost of his own well-being, severely doubting what possible reason the King of Baron could have for decimating innocents and suffering from guilt of the blood on his hands. Even his girlfriend Rosa can't speak through his remorseful nature, and he laments that he will never be able to be with her, as he is a Dark Knight. With the doubts that Cecil has, the king yeets Cecil's rank of Captain of the Red Wings and sends him and his dragoon friend, Cain Highwind, on a quest to deliver a ring to a nearby village of summoners known as Mist, officially starting the game. From Captain of the Red Wings to a postie. It's one hell of a demotion. Together, Cecil and Cain travel through the Mist Caves, giving ample opportunity to fight enemies through the numerous random encounters in Final Fantasy IV. As a Dark Knight, Cecil has access to the Darkness ability, which, if you didn't already know was an edgy move, you will when you realise it involves Cecil hurting himself to send out waves of darkness at multiple enemies. This is pretty bitchin'. Cain meanwhile is a dragoon, which alongside its famous move Jump, is a staple of the Final Fantasy series as a whole, allowing the user to straight up fly into the atmosphere Dragon Ball Z style to completely avoid damage from enemies, and then come crashing down to skewer the foe. Which comes in especially handy for the first boss, which just so happens to be a dragon that can turn into mist and beat the everlasting shit out of Cecil, because I wasn't paying attention to my health from using darkness a tad too much, which is something Final Fantasy IV really didn't do too well. It didn't actually give any explanation of what the moves do, and while I certainly own up to my own dumb-dumbness for not watching the health drop every time I used it, it's something that the game is very, very guilty of. So yeah, Cecil died in the first boss, and I felt like an idiot. Thank God for Cain though. Yeah, that'll teach you for stopping us makeshift postmen from making the delivery to the nearby village. Nothing will stop the post, neither rain nor... Oh no. It was a bomb. Turns out that the ring is filled with those pesky Final Fantasy bombs, which completely total the village and kill a bunch of people. But also the priority here is that we also happen to have murderized the mother of a young girl known as Rydia, who took on the form of said dragon to prevent the duo from reaching the village. Gee, how are we going to break this to this poor girl? Oh, I know. Da 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 da, we killed your mom. During what could be considered the biggest kerfuffle of the century, Cecil and Cain admit how they straight up turned her mother into EXP, and she explodes into a rage, summoning Titan and causing a landslide, trapping both her and Cecil on the other side, blocking their way back to Cain and the Kingdom of Baron. Cecil manages to drag the unconscious Rydia to a nearby desert town, Kaipo, where he lets her rest, only for the Baron army to show up to kill the young summoner. Instead, Cecil decides to beat the living shite out of them, which immediately gains her respect and trust, and she joins his party. You know what, Dark Knight? You may have killed my mother and completely destroyed my home village, but you're alright, you know that? In the village are a number of commodities, such as armour and weapon shops, as well as an inn to help restore health if the player needs it. What is perhaps the most unusual option is Naming Way, a rabbit who keeps insisting that Cecil change his name, which is something unusual about this particular Final Fantasy. Normally the option to name the character appears at the start of the game, but this instead just gives the player the option to change the name whenever they see naming way. And he appears a lot, as if the directors thought it was a vital feature that the player would absolutely need. Also in the small desert town is Cecil's partner, Rosa, who showed up looking for Cecil only to fall sick with a desert fever that can only be cured by a jewel known as the Sand Ruby. Ah yes, when I am sick, I too need jewels and shinies, but that's more to pay off the medical bills. Am I right? Together with Rydia, Cecil heads out to save Rosa's life by finding the ruby in the Antlion Cave. Rydia, unlike Cecil and Kain, is more magic based, and while weaker to damage enemies physically, she has the ability to summon spirits, starting with a chocobo, which comes and kicks the enemy in the shin before running off, and eventually learning new summon spells through plot purposes, or by rare drops from enemies. How rare, I hear you ask? I never once even encountered a single goddamn one of these summon drops. But what I did encounter was plenty of white and black magic, which Rydia learns as she levels up. As they make their way through the underground waterway, they meet with old crazy man Tela, who looks to join the party in order to beat a tough enemy and so they can reach the town of Damascene. Like Rydia, Tela is a mage, although with much more spells. Who'd have thought that an old man would have such a superior collection of spells compared to a young child? But at the same time, Tela is a doddering old man, so a lot of his magic has been forgotten, aside from a few such as Cura, Asuna, Life and the standard black magic spells Fire, Blizzard and Thunder. However, to make up for this, he instead has his own special ability known as Recall, which has a chance to let him cast a spell at random, but it's not exactly great. For one thing, he has a 15% chance of casting Fire, Blizzard or Thunder, which he already knows, as well as Toad, which turns his pesky foes into frogs. Aside from that, there's a 5% chance of casting Break, Bio, Tornado or Death, which are actually pretty good spells, but the odds are pretty low, especially when you consider that using Recall has a whopping 20% chance of failing because poor Tela can't remember jack shit. So you're honestly just better using his already known magic to proceed. Throughout the dungeon, the party are sure to lose their HP from getting smacked in the face by monsters, and MP from casting spells to zap them into the afterlife, which means they often need to make use of restoration items such as potions for HP, and the more rare ethers for MP. One of the best sites for an adventure weary from constant random encounters are the save rooms, another staple of Final Fantasy IV, which allows the player to save their game mid-dungeon, and to camp for the night using a tent or cottage, with the latter of which fully restoring health points and MP. And what would become a series staple is the ability to save and use tents and cottages out in the overworld, acting as an easy to access save point before a big dungeon. Together they fight the Octomammoth, which looks more like an octopus and less of an 8-limbed mammoth, allowing them to successfully get through the dungeon and out to the other side, where they arrive at Damascene. They find it bombed by Baron's fleet and everything decimated, including Tela's daughter Anna, who ran away with the prince of the castle, Edward. And you can imagine how pissed off that Tela is, to the point he rages and attacks the bard head on, in excellent physical combat. Ow! Just as well Tela's strength game is as weak as his trash talk game, although Spoony Bard is regarded and highly beloved as one of the most famous quotes in the franchise, attributed to pretty bad translation, where the original Japanese dialogue was a bitter dialogue from a grieving father calling Edward a bastard. The English version got dunked on for pretty silly dialogue. A woman is dying and you're all laughing. Final Fantasy IV does these non-playable battle sequences a lot, being a sort of cutscene to help depict the importance of the plot. And of course, nothing could be more important plot-wise than watching an old man lose his shit and bash a young boy over the top of the head and cause him some brain damage. After a brief sequence, it ends as Anna calls for her father to stop going Randy Marsh levels of violence against her lover. In the end, Anna succumbs to her wounds and Tella rage quits, leaving the party completely, swearing to fight the one responsible, Golbez, Cecil's new replacement as captain of the Red Wings. Instead of Grandpa Lou over here, we get Crybaby Eddie, who joins our party. Edward over here is pretty weak, although comes with a few abilities such as Sing, which lets him put a status effect on an enemy. Aside from this, he also has access to the heal command, which splits a potion across the party, which would really help if the game actually told the player it did this. I thought this was a free heal and Edward was actually pretty bitching until I got a notification saying I'd used up all of my potions. Fuck you, Edward. But perhaps Edward's most notable feature is what an utter shitebag he is. And I'm not just saying that to be a dick. Edward is literally a shitebag in that he has the ability to run from combat, known as hide, removing him from combat for a turn much like Kane's Dragoon jump, but infinitely less cool. But the kicker is that if Edward's health runs low, then he'll automatically run and hide. Absolute shitebag. With the help of Edward's uncanny abilities to cry and run away and, more importantly, his bitching ride, the hovercraft, which allows the player to drive across shallow water, the trio manages to successfully find the ruby and takes it back to Rosa, who recovers and joins the party, willing to help stop Golbez from attacking the next crystal town, Fabul. But before we get to enjoy her company, we get a lonely scene of Edward playing his harp in the middle of the night, which is low-key rude since everyone is asleep. So naturally, he gets attacked for being inconsiderate. As he fights a Sahagin alone, Anna's ghost appears to spur him on, giving him newfound confidence. Apparently, I don't really see it. Their journey takes them to Mount Hobbs, blocked by a large block of ice that only Rydia can destroy. But since the horrible PTSD of bombs literally exploding all around her, she's unwilling to try until Rosa asks her to, which helps her to learn Fire to melt the ice, the one spell that so far she hasn't been able to learn through leveling up, which is honestly pretty damn good when it comes to character development. It's just a shame that that's as much as we're going to see from her, but we'll get back to that later on. As for Rosa joining the party, she is the game's resident white mage, coming equipped with cure magic that will certainly save the party's butts on many occasions. Like the other characters, she also has her own abilities, one of which being Prey, which allows her to use cure at no MP cost. But what makes Rosa a little bit more different from other white mages is that she can still absolutely kick arse, as she doubles as an archer, meaning she can fire shots, especially strong ones with her aim ability. So she's as liable to shoot an arrow in your knee as she is to heal you. This is one white mage you don't want to fuck with. I think at this point, it's probably worthwhile talking about the role system of combat now that we have a bunch of party members added to the team. Roles have always been a pretty important part of Final Fantasy since its inception, with a front and back row where squishier characters tend to hang back to avoid taking as much damage at the cost of their own. Usually this means healers and black mages take the rear position while the tankier characters stand at the front head on. Normally this is a simple toggle, but for some reason 4 makes it so that there are 2 front slots and 3 back row slots, meaning that these positions need to be filled, so at times I found characters I wanted to keep at the back getting damaged pretty heavily. You might be doing some quick math in your head thinking I'm incorrect with the party member count there, but no, Final Fantasy IV has the distinction of allowing a party of 5 controllable characters at once. Atop Mount Hobbs, the party runs into Yang, a Fabul monk who we get to see kick some serious ass in another battle cutscene, showing his abilities before he joins the party as our first 5th member, who's pretty strong and capable of executing a kick across all enemies while also having the ability to focus and brace. Focus allowing him to charge up like a Super Saiyan and deal double his damage on his next turn, and brace being a move that helps boost his defense against attacks. Although, honestly, I didn't see much of a point of waiting a turn to charge up when I could just attack twice. In Fabul, the party fends off another attack from Baron, intent on stealing their crystal, although getting pushed further and further back into the castle until they're cornered in the crystal room by none other than Kain, seemingly intent on battling Cecil and making a complete U-turn inside, beating the ever-loving shite out of Cecil in the process. The man of the hour Golbez finally makes an appearance, obliterating both Yang and Edward and stealing not only the crystal, but also our most valuable character, Rosa. You son of a bitch, Golbez, I can accept stealing the crystal. I can accept beating up Edward. In fact, I can encourage it. But stealing my healer? Now it's personal. With permission from the King of Fabul, our quartet head off on a ship to rescue Rosa and defeat Golbez and Kain and Baron once and for all. Except we don't, and we lose the entire party during an attack by Leviathan, who shows up and levels the ship for reasons whatever. Thanks Leviathan, real swell of you my guy. Shipwrecked and washed ashore, Cecil is alone on the southeastern continent, where he returns back to Mysidia, the village he attacked and stole the crystal at the start of the game. And understandably so, everyone is a bit pissed off at him. In fact, some of them straight up just turn him into a toad and others turn him into a pig. I'm sensing you lovely folk are quick to hold a grudge. The elder of the village insists that in order to atone, Cecil must climb Mount Ordeals and to toss away his dark sword and become a paladin of light. Together with two children that the elder clearly doesn't value enough since he sends them to the top of a mountain with the man who butchered their fellow villagers, Cecil makes the journey atop Mount Ordeal. Together, Palom and Porom are black and white mages, respectively. The siblings perform similarly to the previous mages in the party, but come with their own abilities. For Palom, he can use Bluff, which raises his intelligence and damage done by casting black magic. And for Porom, she can cry, I guess. Thing is, I didn't actually know what this did until I looked up. And it apparently allows the player to much easily steal items from the enemy. But here's the snag. There is no means to actually steal any items from enemies at this point in the game. In fact, throughout the game, whenever Porom is in the party, there is no method of stealing, making this ability completely and utterly useless. I'd be eager to get you into the bin with Edward Hun, but you do have some good healing magic, and one important mechanic with your brother. Together, they share an ability, Twincast. Twincast is an ability that requires both siblings, and after charging up what's their version of a Kamehameha, they unleash a powerful spell which is often being Pyroblast or Comet, which is obscenely powerful, dealing damage in the thousands and pretty much melting the foe's face off. While climbing Mount Ordeals, they bump into Tella in the hunt for the powerful spell Meteor, before joining the party once more, aiding Cecil on his journey on becoming a goody-two-shoes paladin. However, on the path, they're attacked by Golbez's lackeys, one of the archfiends, Scarmillion, which has two forms, although neither which stand a chance against the absurdly powerful Twincast. Inside one of the graves, a voice calls out to Cecil and names him his son, and asks him to cast aside his dark ways, providing him with a sword, and Cecil Sailor Moon transforms into a paladin, but first needs to defeat the darkness within, in the form of his Dark Knight self, by standing and doing absolutely nothing. The true paladin way, which ends the battle, leaving Cecil to bask in the light of his newfound paladin powers. While Paladin sounds a lot less cooler than Dark Knight, it's still neat that Final Fantasy IV incorporates a job change, much like what happened in the original Final Fantasy. As a Paladin, Cecil returns back to level 1, but is still just as powerful, and also gains access to basic white magic such as Cure. And not only that, Tela suddenly overcomes his bout of Alzheimer's to finally remember his entire spells, including Meteor, a spell that he cannot use ever due to his MP only being 90. And the MP will only ever be 90. He does, of course, no longer have the ability to use Recall, since he has access to all of his spells. Having proved himself to the Elder of Mysidia, Cecil is permitted to use a secret route from the village back to Baron, accompanied by Palom and Porom, as well as Tela. Back home they find Yang, who seems to have turned coat on the party, leading to a battle. Jesus, can anyone not be trusted in this game? Fortunately, it can be completely resolved by bashing him several times over the head until he regains his memories and rejoins the party. Together they sneak into the castle Baron, only to bump into Baigun, captain of the Royal Knights, who decides to join the party. Before the game decides to nope, and reveals he's actually a monster sent by Golbez, leading into another boss fight. Well Baigun, our time was short, but I appreciate it nonetheless. Victorious, the party races on, confronting the King of Baron, who turns out to be an imposter, and in reality is one of the elemental lords, Cagnazzo. After beating the fiend, Sid shows up, eager to join the party. But what's that? You count 6 party members? Oh, don't worry, the game solves that by murderizing our 2 children friends. Outside the throne room is a trap, with the doors locked and the walls begin to push in to turn Cecil into a paladin pancake. Instead of being sensible and using teleport to safely escape, Porom and Palom decide to nope out reality by casting Break on themselves, which petrifies them and removes them from the rest of the game. Due to the fact that they've petrified themselves of their own free will, it means that they can no longer be healed with Isuna or any remedies. In fact, the game even gives a window to heal them with an item, but no such item actually exists, and there's nothing that Cecil and his party can do.
Yes, very sad. Anyway.
2 members down, the party escapes from Baron on Sid's airship, only for Kane to board the ship and make a demand. Rose's life in exchange for the Earth Crystal. With Sid and the airship, the world is the player's oyster, allowing them to fly around to the little heart's content. With new character Sid, he's a physical fighter, although his ability is to simply use the scan magic spell, allowing him to analyse an enemy's health and weakness, and isn't really too much to speak about. Eventually, after road tripping around the world, they finally make the trip to Troya. As luck would have it though, Cecil doesn't need to kill anyone at the castle for the crystal, since it's already been stolen by a dark elf. Also in the castle is a bedridden Edward, who gives Cecil a twin harp. The journey for the Earth Crystal takes the party to the Magnetic Cavern, perhaps one of the most unusual and irritating dungeons in any Final Fantasy. Due to the magnetic waves in the caves, characters are unable to use any metal equipment. Failure to do so will result in the entire party being paralysed and giving a game over. Instead, they need to remove all metal items, which means Cecil sucks for this part of the game, and everyone is so incredibly fleshy and vulnerable. Deep in the caverns, the Dark Elf appears to have made himself his own little crystal room. I really like what you've done to the place, sir. If the player didn't get the harp from Edward, then they're shit out of luck and the game will end. Otherwise, a battle takes place, wiping the party out. Edward senses a disturbance in the force and plays his harp. Which amplifies through Cecil's harp and nullifies the Dark Elf's magnetic field. Admittedly, very useful for something that Edward did, but also could have done with that a bit earlier, huh? With this, the party can equip their gear and battle the Dark Elf at full power, vanquishing it and regaining the Earth Crystal and making the trade. In return, Kane directs the party to the Tower of Zot, filled to the brim with monsters in a devilish trap by Golbez, alongside the Magus sisters. Although also filled to the brim with save points for the party to camp at. A bit of a designer flaw right there, Golbez baby.
I don't understand. They should be here right now. Where are they?
They're, camping in the room for the night.
They're what?
Atop the tower, the party finally confronts Golbez, with Tela charging him and attacking, although struggling to really damage the big bad boy. In a last-ditch effort, he decides to cast Meteor, despite his feeble and decrepit state, defeating Golbez, who flees, leaving behind Kane, whose mind control is broken. However, the cost of casting Meteor is too much for Tela, killing him. With Kane's help, they rescue Rosa, only to be accosted by the third archfiend, Barbarella, an enemy that needs Kane to use his jump attacks while she hides in her tornado as it counters all physical attacks. Defeated, Barbs decides to destroy the tower, but Rosa manages to teleport the party back to Cecil's room in Castle Baron. With this, Golbez has all the light crystals needed in his goal to reach the moon, but Kane explains that this is only half the crystals needed. Other crystals exist underground in the underworld. The group moves to a town called Agart, where Cecil throws a magma rock in the wishing well, which causes a huge explosion nearby, to the absolute concern of nobody, who continue on in their day as if nothing has happened. But this opens the pathway needed to fly the airship into the underworld. Getting caught in the crossfires between the Red Wings and underworld residential dwarfs, the ship crashes. At the Dwarven Castle, the dwarfs greet them on their quest, while Sid goes back to fix up the ship so it can withstand the heat of the underworld. But some of Golbez's monsters have already infiltrated the crystal room in the form of creepy dolls, which form into one giant ugly one, which players of Final Fantasy XIV might recognise as the creepy bastard doll from one of the dungeons. Despite defeating it, Golbez appears to fight the party but is much too strong, clearly useless without the sheer raw power of Sid. Golbez summons a dragon, wiping out everyone but Cecil. But before he can land the final blow, a mysterious person destroys the dragon with their own Mist Dragon. A now grown up Rydia, who heals Cecil and helps the party to defeat Golbez. As it turns out, when cast overboard by Leviathan, the serpent took Rydia to the land of summons, where time flows differently and now she's grown up in age, but is also now a fully fledged summoner. So why did he do it? Who knows. Apparently throwing a young girl in water and destroying the ship was his way to help the cause? You're a dick, Leviathan, you know that, right? It also kinda feels a bit cheap. Rydia just came out of nowhere like, BTW, I know more shit. Character development! Rydia, you can't just say the words character development and expect anything to happen. The party turn to leave, leaving Golbez in one of the most stupidest moments I've ever seen. And despite being defeated, Golbez goes full Thing from Adam's family, and his hand crawls and snatches the crystal. Are you for real, Cecil? At least we have Rydia back, I guess. But she's had a few changes. Unlike her younger self, Rydia no longer has access to white magic. For reasons. But to make up for that, she has a larger catalogue of summons at her disposal, including some of the classic staples, Shiva, Ramu, Ifrit, and Titan, as well as a Mist Dragon. The party heads off to the Tower of Babel to fight the final archfiend, Rubicante, but he teleports away before the party can fight him. Instead, they fight Dr. Lugie and his creation Barnabas, the latter of which proceeding to turn on his creator in a joke fight before it self-destructs. Instead, Dr. Lugie then starts another fight, turning into a mech, I guess? Get in the fucking robot, Lugie. Further in, the party fights with goblins manning cannons that are attacking the dwarves, but they damage the control so it cannot be stopped. In a last ditch effort, Yang stays behind, sacrificing himself. As they leave, Golbez destroys the bridge, causing the remaining party to plummet to their deaths, only to be rescued by Sid, who has fixed the airship. But during the chase, Sid decides he wants a chance of being the tragic hero, choosing to bomb himself as the ship flies back out of the underground to block the entrance and stop the pursuers. Can people in my party please stop killing themselves? Please! The party returns back to Baron, where they find some of Sid's engineers who fix up the airship and add on a crane game hook to the ship, allowing it to pick up the hovercraft we abandoned long ago, giving access to the caves of Eblin, another way back into the underground, and home to the city of Eblin, where they find Prince Edge fighting the archfiend Rubicanti, whose introduction is the party watching him getting his arse handed to him and making weird passes at the girls in the group before he joins the party. Great, that's some really good first impressions right there. Edge is a ninja, and is incredibly fast and pretty strong, but also has pretty shitty defense, so he spends most of my game Family Guy face planting on the ground. As a ninja, Edge has the ability to steal items from enemies, as well as throw items at them, such as old weaponry, which does some pretty good damage, although it uses up the item in question. Edge's defining ability is his ninjutsu, which lets him cast magic such as Flame, which causes fire damage on all enemies. While heading back up the Tower of Babel, the party encounters Edge's parents, who have become monsters, and the party fights, although it's an easy fight as the monarchs become released from their control and end the battle, leaving Eblin and their sons capable but pervy hands. Rubicanti appears, healing the party for a fair fight, where he has two forms, one where he stands normally and is weak to ice magic, and a cloak form where all magic heals him. Although as far as battles go, this was actually pretty easy. With the final archfiend defeated, the party enter the crystal room, but then fall into a trap that sends them plummeting. Of course. The party never actually reaches the room, but instead they find an enemy airship, allowing them to fly once more. The Falcon allows them to fly around the underworld, although not above lava. Luckily, in the Dwarven Castle Infirmary is Sid, who is very much still alive despite having plummeted to the ground while also bombing himself. With his help, he reworks the Falcon so it can fly over lava, and alongside the Necklace of the Dwarven King, allows the player to enter the sealed cavern, which holds the final dark crystal that isn't in Golbez's slimy palms. After fighting through the dungeon, they finally reach the crystal, although, surprise surprise, they proceed to lose it, as Cain is taken over once more by Golbez and snatches the crystal. With all the crystals, Golbez finally achieves his goals, and the party learns that the only way to stop him is the tail of the lunar whale. Sid adds one final attachment to the Falcon, a huge massive fucking drill, allowing them to dig their way back up to the surface, where the posse return back to Mysidia, with the mages praying and causing the lunar whale to finally awaken. With the lunar whale, the party gains the ability to fly to the moon. You'll probably notice that during this section I kept watching my party die, and that's because I'm an idiot. I didn't do any side quest up to this point, but you know what? I'm all for a challenge. But also because I knew that at the end of this moon section I would be able to snag another party member and thus have better odds. Ha 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 ha. On top of the moon and inside the moon's labyrinth is the Crystal Palace, where they meet with an old man, Fusoya, a resident of the moon known as the Lunarians, a race originally from a planet between Mars and Jupiter and who safeguards the slumbering inhabitants who reside on the moon. He reveals that one such Lunarian awoke, looking to destroy the Earth and create his own world, a being known as Zemus, who controls Golbez in an effort to awaken a being known as the Giant of Babel. He also reveals that one of the Lunarians is a man known as Kluya, and that Cecil is his son, making him an alien or something. Fusuya also joins the party as the final recruitable party member, a mage. Like Tella, he has access to both black and white magic, but his stats aren't exactly much to write home about, having pretty low MP. He can, however, use the ability Regen, which helps the party by healing them for a few turns, but renders himself unable to move. Returning back to the Earth, I decided it was time to pursue the side quests I'd neglected, only to wind up in a battle with the Iron Giant himself, the Giant of Babel, locking myself into another dungeon. During this, some old friends show up, including the dwarfs and Yang, who's suddenly back, as well as the Elder of Mysidia, who brought Porum and Polum back too. Damn, is anyone not dead in this damn game? While exploring inside of the giant, they enter a final encounter with all 4 archfiends, who they fight one at a time, and who kept kicking my ass. See, previously we fought them no bother, but Barb's is a different story. See, Kain was an important aspect as it stopped her from using her tornado form, which allowed her to use a counterattack that counterattacked physical attacks with Maelstrom, which completely devastates the entire party, leaving them with low health. Although apparently she is weak to holy magic now, for whatever reason. With the Archfiends defeated, the party enters the Giant's Core, which again is a strange battle where the party faces off against the CPU and a defense and attack node. Normally in battles like this, the player usually expects to attack the side enemies first before moving on to the main enemy, but this is an absolute recipe for disaster, leading the CPU to use a move called Globe 199, dealing 9,999 damage on 2 party members until it regenerates its attack and defense nodes. So essentially killing off 2 of your party members. Yikes. Instead, the party needs to kill the defense node so that it can stop healing the CPU and then focus on the CPU before finishing off the attack node. With the giant defeated, Golbez shows up, angered by the destruction, but Fusuya breaks the control Zemus has on Golbez, reawakening his memories and revealing that he is also the son of Kluya, making him Cecil's brother. Gotta love a bit of this family drama. In order to stop Zemus, Golbez and Fusuya head to the moon to fight the foe, while Kain appears to help the party escape. On board the Lunar Whale, they decide to join the fight against Zemus, with Cecil nobly saying that Rosa and Rydia can't come, because they're girls, this is a bro-only club. But then they actually show up anyway because Cecil is just being stupid by not bringing some of his 2 most strongest allies. And here we enter the final parts of the game, with a predetermined party of Cecil, Rydia, Rosa, Kain and Edge, and the party can proceed through the moon to reach the final boss. Or they can pursue the side quests ripe for picking, which I think I really had to do because I kept dying to the enemies on the moon. The first side quest is the Land of the Summons, located in the Cave of Summons in the Underworld, filled with lava which the player needs to avoid by casting Float on the party, otherwise they feel the burn. Eventually they reach the Land of the Summons and meet with the Queen and King, Asura and Leviathan. In order to gain them as summons, Rydia needs to prove herself to them in battle, resulting in 2 battles and ending with them as summons. With Asura, she has a chance to cast 3 spells: Curaga, Raise or Protect, whereas Leviathan summons a tsunami of non-elemental damage to attack all enemies. The second side quest is the Sylvan Cave, where at the end is where I guess Yang was hiding all this time, since they keep talking about him as if they miss him. Here Rydia earns the summon Sylph, which summons a fairy and causes them to damage the enemy while absorbing the damage and spreading it to the entire party. The third side quest leads to a cave in the overworld, where the player finds a man looking for a rat tail in exchange for an ore known as adamant. Which doesn't seem like a fair trade, but I'm not going to complain. With the adamant, the party takes it underground to a dwarf smith who forges it into Excalibur itself, one of Cecil's best weapons. Another side quest involves returning back to Baron Castle, where the party finds the spirit of King Baron, who in turn challenges the party as Odin, becoming yet another summon for Rydia if they succeed in defeating him. For Odin, he has a 50% chance to immediately kill off any normal enemy, but this doesn't work on bosses. No cheesing allowed. The final side quest of Final Fantasy IV is entering the cave of Bahamut, the god of the summons, who resides in the moon, and who once again demands that Rydia prove herself in combat before joining her as yet another summon for her to bring into battle. Which is just as well, because Bahamut is probably the game's strongest summon, and now he's our little bitch and ready to be spammed against the bad guys. With all this, we're finally all prepped and ready to enter the final dungeon of the game, the Lunar Subterrane, filled to the brim with epic weapons, but tricky bosses. But beating them gives the player some of the best weaponry in the game, such as Kane's Holy Lance, some ribbons for Rydia and Rosa, giving them immunity to all status effects, Cecil's best weapon, the Ragnarok, and Edge's best weapon, the Masamune. With all weapons and armour gained, it was time to face off against the final boss, Zemus, only to arrive too late and watch as Golbez and Fusia demolish him easily enough. But of course, this is all just part of his plot. Shed of his mortal coil, the hatred of Zemus forms into something more powerful, known as Zeromus, and demolishing the entire party. With Cecil and his crew's impending doom, everyone back on the earth sends their thoughts and prayers. But unlike real life, this actually does a level of good, providing them with power and restoring the health of the party for one final encounter, where Cecil uses the crystal to show Zeromus's true form and allows them to attack him, leading into the final epic battle to save the world. Finally, this is the moment. It's all or nothing at this point, and only we can stop him. So of course, we lose. Because holy shit, this boss was a lot tougher than I expected. Sending massive amounts of damage with Big Bang, which eradicated everyone quickly. Poor Rydia and Edge must be anti-evolutionists because they just couldn't stand it. In the end, it came to what we RPG fans do best. Time to grind. Unwilling to sit through the extra long sequence of everyone praying over and over again, I grinded a lot. Effectively levelling my entire party from level 57 to their 70s over a few hours of running back and forth and fighting enemies, before finally facing off against Zeromus. And even then, he kept killing some of my weaker party members like Rydia and Edge. But in the end, Zeromus is defeated, vowing that as long as evil will remain, it too shall exist, like some sort of edgy goth kid who is kicked out of the local Hot Topic. With the world saved, Fusia and Golbez return back to slumber until they can find somewhere inhabitable to live, with Cecil forgiving his brother finally. The game ends with the Lunar Whale returning underwater, and recapping the events of the party, with Porom and Palom resuming their training as mages, Edge being a pretty shite leader and rushing out on adventures, Rydia returning back to the land of summons, and Yang spontaneously becoming the king of Fabul. Meanwhile, Edward looks to rebuild his castle and laments on Anna and Tella's sacrifices, and Kane stands atop the peak of Mount Ordeal, lamenting his actions and vowing to train like Cecil did to make up for his past and to surpass his own father and become a strong dragoon. And finally, Cecil becomes the king of Baron, with Rosa becoming his queen, and Golbez calls out to his brother, simply saying,
"So long."
In the end, the party gathers for the wedding of Rosa and Cecil, ending the game. Final Fantasy IV is the earliest game in the series that I've finished, having mostly focused on future games in the series that reigned in what some might call the renaissance of Final Fantasy in the PlayStation era. And truthfully, it was a fantastic experience, which, although showing signs of odd dialogue, was a comprehensive story that focused more on its characters than what I believe previous games did, while also, most importantly, providing one of the most important gameplay systems to Final Fantasy, the ATB system, which would continue on for several more games in the series. and also be utilised by other games by the company, such as in Chrono Trigger, argued as one of the best RPGs ever made. Want to make sure you don't miss out on the next video for Final Fantasy V? Then make sure you don't forget to subscribe to Noir Reservoir and click that little bell down there to be kept up to date on all future Noir Reservoir videos. And if you want to help support the channel, please consider liking the video and sharing it with any role-playing game aficionados you think will appreciate it. And finally, why not consider following me on some of my other platforms? You can find me on Twitter, Tumblr, or even my own Discord server for all the dank memes. I'm sure you won't regret it. Probably. So until next time, my friends, I'll catch you later.